Yeah, I was actually at the same gym that Vitor Belfort, when he was making his debut in the UFC. I was training at his gym.
Okay.
Because it was Carlson Gracie's academy, which was in Hollywood, and I was learning from his coaches. It was crazy, like to watch Vitor. Before
Now, how did you connect with UFC and Dana White?
Back then, so when Vitor was making his debut,
right?
Campbell McLaren.
So this was like late 90s?
97.
97, okay.
So Campbell McLaren, who was one of the producers of the UFC, it was a good friend of my manager.
Okay.
And they were just having a conversation.
Wow.
And he said, hey, he was, randomly talking to him about how I got to hire a new guy to do interviews. We need someone to do interviews. And my manager said, Joe is obsessed. Like, he watches them all. Like, he's really obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Maybe he would do it. And so they get us on the phone. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll do it. And like, you got to take a propeller plane to like, Dothan, Alabama. I'm like, I'm in. Let's go. And so
cool.
Next thing you know, I'm on these fucking puddle jumper planes flying to all these weird, because it was totally illegal.
And this was
in most states.
this was like
97.
They had those. I think Dana bought it from the guys that did the
Bob
tough men,
Meyerowitz.
the whole thing in the bar where they beat the crap out of each other in the parking lot.
This was before Dana owned it. This is Bob Meyerowitz.
Oh, really?
I worked for SEG, which was the original company.
So this was long before the Fertitta brothers came along with Dana and all that. Okay.
That's how I got back into it. I quit. I did it for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I did backstage interviews. And then there was an event in Japan. I'm like, I'm not going to Japan. I don't have any time. It was literally costing me money.
Okay.
Like, I loved doing it, but I could make more money doing a comedy club at the weekend than I could going.
They weren't making any money, so how are they going to pay you any money, right?
Exactly. There was no money to be made. Right. There was no money for the fighters. I mean, it wasn't I wasn't getting screwed. It was just that's all it was. Like, we would go to these like half-filled high school auditoriums. Like, there was no one.
Because a lot of states were banning it and stuff like that back then?
Yeah, it was very hard to get sanctioned.
Right.
That's why we had to go to like Dothan, Alabama.
Right.
We had to go, it got banned in New York, actually. My first event was supposed to be in New York, but they banned it in New York right before they did the event, and they moved the event very quickly, like overnight, to Dothan, Alabama.
Were the boxing promoters trying to shut it down?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
100%. And there was also like, there's so much shenanigans that goes on. There's unions. There's there's.
If you're not paying them, they're not going to
100%
let you play.
That's how the UFC stayed out of New York State forever.
Okay.
The UFC just got in New York legally. God, how many years ago was it? It wasn't that long ago.
Wow.
Like crazy
Really?
recent. Yeah, crazy recent. It doesn't make any sense. It was in every other state. It was legal.
2015, 16, wasn't that?
Somewhere around then, right?
Wow.
Let's see what the actual.
I mean, I never thought about the politics of it till we were just chatting, but I'm like,
well, back then it was like, it was scary. Like, what is this? No one knew what it was. You didn't have all these years and years of guys like Royce Gracie and George St. Pierre and Kamaru Usman. We didn't have anything to draw from. 2016, which is so crazy. New York, the last state to approve it. New York.
That's crazy.
Because they're dirty.
Politics.
The guy who was holding it back, I believe he got arrested for corruption. See if that's true.
Wow.
There was a senator that he got busted for some shenanigans, but he was part of the problem, holding it back.
Right.
But in the beginning, I could see why they would hold it back. Like, you're watching these guys headbutt each other.
Right.
They could
Well,
kick
I remember
in
just
the
seeing
nuts.
all the blood and everything, and
Crazy.
remember they used to do the foot stomping and all that. I mean,
Well, foot stomping's still legal.
they can do that. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
But what you would see back then was like nut shots. You were allowed to punch people in the nuts.
Wow. Brutal. I mean, straight up street fight.
There's a fight with Keith Hackney and Joe Son, and Keith Hackney is on top of Joe Son, and Joe Son's like cranking on his neck, and Keith Hackney's just punching him in the nuts.
He ain't wearing a cup. Oh my
He's wearing a
God.
cup. He's wearing a cup. Yeah, but even so, like,
still,
whatever.
yeah, right.
You're still getting punched in the nuts.
Yeah,
even if
right.
you have a cup on, it hurts like hell.
Yeah, yeah.
So like, back in those days, I kind of understand why someone who didn't understand what was going on would think this should be illegal.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
Right.
And it was like they had to develop rules. So they developed weight classes, and then they developed rules. But I was kind of already on the way out by then. And so in 98-ish, 99, I quit.
Okay.
And then the UFC got purchased by Zuffa.
Okay.
And that was in like 2001. And I went to one of their first events.
Okay.
Vladimir Matyushenko fought Tito Ortiz, and it was right after September 11th.
Okay.
And Tito Ortiz, they used to have these elaborate walk-ins with like lights and fire and shit. And Tito Ortiz is walking into the octagon with an American flag. and the place goes wild.
Wow.
Just wild.
That's cool.
Because it was like right after
Yeah.
September 11th.
Sure.
It was like, holy shit.
People needed a break from all of that serious stuff.
And during that fight, the pay-per-view went out, and like the people didn't get to see the last rounds of the main event.
Oh, no.
It was a huge disaster. The UFC had to give back who knows how much money, because it was like their big event in Vegas, and the pay-per-view fucked up.
So Dana bought it yet at this point?
It was the Zuffa, which was the Fertitta brothers and Dana.
Okay.
They're the organization that bought it. So the Fertitta brothers bought it,
right?
And then Dana was running it, and this was the very early stages. And this was, you know, there was no TV to speak of that was showing the UFC.
Right.
They had to get this deal on Spike TV to put it on television.
Right.
That was like years in. So this is like 2005.
Okay.
So we're like 4 years later. These guys are hemorrhaging money trying to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
And when that was going on, nobody took it seriously. Like everybody thought it was just like.
Isn't that when they came up with the idea of Ultimate Fighter? Is that kind of maybe what turned the corner for them?
They paid for everything. They paid to put the show on. I think they even bought out the ads, and they took care of the whole thing. They put it on television. It was like a Hail Mary, and it was a fucking touchdown.
Wow.
And Stephan Bonner, rest in peace, he just died. Okay. And Forrest Griffin had the most insane fight in the finals of the Ultimate Fighter.
Wow.
And people were just calling friends up. You got to watch this. This is insane, because the viewership skyrockets during the fight.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's so wild.
Right.
And that fight made the UFC. That fight made the sport.
Really?
Because then people are like, what is this?
Okay.
And then they put on another event.
Yeah.
And the other event got fucking huge. And then Chuck Liddell came out to the scene.
Yes.
And when Chuck Liddell was the champion, Chuck Liddell was so fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
He was this do or die berserker. He would just come at you, just swinging bombs, take one on the chin, knock dudes out. His fights were wild.
He didn't give a shit.
He was the real reason why the UFC became uber popular, because you would watch The Ultimate Fighter, and it was a wild fight, a great fight, but then you need a destroyer.
Right.
You need a destroyer, and that destroyer was Chuck Liddell. And for the run where he was at the top, where Chuck Liddell was just murking people.
So he was kind of like the Michael Jordan in that he basically took the sport to another level?
No, well, you know, he was an exceptional champion.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say he was the Michael Jordan.
Okay.
He was just,
fair enough.
he had the most fan-friendly style you could ever imagine. He would just come after dudes and smash people. Like, he was never trying to win decisions. Chuck Liddell was trying to send you into the dream world.
Okay.
And that
so he was
became
he was
the
entertainer.
UFC.
He was Maximus the
yes.
yeah.
When he would win, he would throw his arms back like this. It was crazy.